Uh, thank you, the students of Center for Political Studies. I think this is the third organization from my center. Earlier, probably Beyond Boundaries and JNU Academics. They are working. They are basically doing similar kind of activities, mainly asking speakers to come and deliberate on important political issues. So, of course, more the merrier. So welcoming the young students to start such important organization and start it with this very crucial and difficult question. And probably Avinash was right to suggest that there are certain hidden factors. There are issues which are not visible to most of us. And therefore, though the Supreme Court judgment appears very ethical and moralistic in its design, that it wishes to help the worst of social groups to come out of their precarious condition and become part of the mainstream. So somewhere it appears that there is a ethical moralistic appeal by the Supreme Court to deal with the subcategorization issue. But as we all know that probably there is much more into this debate. For that matter, I was just joking with some of the other faculty members in my center that if you see the Supreme Court judges or the executives of 500 Fortune companies today, or even the awardees of Bharat Ratna, or even an IPL team, what is the common between all of them? The commonality between all of them are they all belong, majority of them belong to the social elite groups. Okay, and this was the question that has been coming through in a very aggressive manner during the general elections time, when social justice and constitutionalism became a very major issue to mobilize the Dalits. And for the rebirth of the Congress party, it is the Dalits' political participation, it is their vote. Of course, Muslims and other marginalized communities were part of that mobilization, but it is the Dalits that sincerely committed themselves to the revival of the Congress party and created a new uproar. And therefore, the idea of social justice and constitutionalism become a core of the current political discussion. Further, in that debate, it was also suggested that the horizon of the social justice policies need to be expanded. That it should not be just limited to the state framework, to the public sector, to the government sector. It needs some kind of an extension, some kind of a expansion in the private economy, in the new liberal economy. Why? Because as many of amongst us are writing that the pie of the cake is shrinking every day. The jobs in the government sector are no more available, and therefore, unless and until we expand that to a bigger forum of liberal economy, market economy, only after that probably there is a possibility of social justice in an economic forum. So that demand was rising in a very substantive way in last 10 or 20 years. And between that, you'll find that the core principles of social justice, which are, of course, I'll just come about those principles that I think are crucial. You'll find that the judiciary is not taking cognizance of those values and principles that the forefathers of the Indian Constitution imagined at that part of time. For that matter, the idea of social justice is, of course, not about some jobs in the state institutions. It is, of course, the battle was about social dignity, self-respect, and counting individuals as human beings. That was the initial battle. That the caste values, the caste system. Okay, so now the popular dialogue. Please maintain the decorum of the house. Keep silent because there will be speakers. Okay, so I was suggesting that the principles of social justice in India. One is, of course, it was started with this very prominent or promising appeal that the social atmosphere, the social order should be egalitarian, there should be a respect of each and every individual, there should be a dignity given to each and every participant of the social order, and that somewhere legitimizing that, somewhere substantiating that is the major claim for the social justice policies. It has started with that, and Ambedkar was very keen to examine that how social reforms are the crucial aspect for a better modern society. Second, of course, he also understood that though modernity is, of course, providing this kind of a newer apparatuses and accesses for human dignity, the modern institutions are completely hegemonized by the social elites perpetually, and therefore probably this call for participation, this call for a policy for reservations was basically imagined on this particular matter, that somewhere the modern institution required diversification, required a diversity from different social groups, that they should be also part of the nation building process, and therefore without the participation of the worst of social groups, mainly Dalits and the Adivasis at that part of time, the making of India a better society will be difficult. And therefore a reservation policy emerged as the process of nation building exercise, that the worst of social groups should participate in the larger design of state machinery, and they should also become part of the modern institution. That was the major call, and therefore from dignity it becomes a kind of a participatory axis where people can enter and do some kind of duties for the nation building. Third, it was not only about the participation in the state politics, it was also imagined that the modernity, modern democracy will provide a new space for the marginalized social groups to mobilize themselves to become a political power, and with that mobilization they can challenge the conventional social elites in political circle and emerge as a new political elites. That was the larger imagination. And finally social justice principle also imagine a better world order, that though the annihilation of caste was one of the major tasks that was unfulfilled by the modern India, but that was the imagination. So it has that kind of longer and very imaginative idea about the modern nation state. When we see the current judgment on scheduled castes and scheduled tribes bifurcation, you will find that this particular aspect, these principles are clearly neglected by the judiciary. There was no discussion about the what they call the implementation and the flaws, and Avinash already talked about the roster system and multiple flaws that are there vis-a-vis the implementation of the reservation policy. That though there are overarching presence of Dalits in the group D, B and C, but when it comes to group A and B, it's just a minimal representation, and therefore this lacunas, this lack of the will of the political establishment to fulfill reservation and create a kind of a space, a political or institutional space which is harmonious and which is participatory by the vulnerable social groups, that possibility has not been examined by the Supreme Court. Second, in this particular categorization, you will also see that those who have benefited, a very small number of people who have benefited from the social justice policies, mainly reservation policies, you will find that there are hints in the judgment that there is some kind of a reprimand or some kind of villainization of those groups who are benefited from the social justice policies, mainly calling them dominant or exploiters or the beneficiaries. It appears that it is hardly understood that though they are part of the what you call mainstream state institutions today, but the blot of untouchability, the blot of caste discrimination has not went away, and therefore though a small section among the Dalits, among the Adivasis have become part of the what you call the state institution, but the arena of discrimination for that matter is still around, and they still face a similar kind of discrimination though they are part of the mainstream, and therefore this particular reprimand of the people who got a minimal benefit from the social justice appears very, very troublesome to me. Second, further, though you can make this particular call that certain groups have benefited, but we need to have some kind of an empirical data to prove that. And probably on that account, again, the Supreme Court, if you read the judgment, again, the Supreme Court is suggesting that they do not have that kind of enough empirical data to support and promote that. It will, of course, create multiple political institutional hurdles. Avinash spoke about that the implementation, already there are multiple crises and controversies vis-a-vis implementation. If you create another corridor within the corridor, you will find that the implementation on that particular group, that Dalits are A, B, C, D, and how to implement that policy again becomes very, very difficult. Third, of course, the Supreme Court is not thinking about, as I said, that there are already a shrinkage of jobs in the government sector, and there are already multiple demands by the scheduled caste groups, or even the tribals, or even for that matter the OBCs, to expand the horizon of social justice policies vis-a-vis the liberal economy. The Supreme Court has not even engaged on that particular scale, and have not suggested that there should be an increase of the state welfare policies. There should be more affirmative action policies for the Dalits and the Adivasis, rather than it suggested that there are certain groups which are benefited out of this particular logic, and therefore they should be excluded. And therefore probably there is a kind of a hidden agenda, as I said, that in the last 2 decades, the way Dalits and the Adivasi groups, social movements, intellectuals and other influential sections have articulated their position vis-a-vis reservation, suggesting that there should be an expansion. And I think somewhere the judiciary has continuously challenged and targeted that. Initially with the idea of creamy layer amongst the OBCs, later on with the EWS reservation, and now with the claim that the Dalits are heterogeneous group, and there are certain what you call lagging behind people, and for their help there is a requirement of a policy reform. These are some of the tactics through which multiple other issues that the Dalits are now claiming to argue, which are they are basically proposing that the social justice is not only about this particular claim of job representation, but there should be a major appeal to change the structure of polity and economy. That claims are avoided by this deliberation and discussion, and therefore it is not a kind of an easy attempt where the Supreme Court appears ethical and moralist, suggesting that it is helping the worst of social group. I think there is, beyond that kind of a facade, there is more to deliberate, and that if we can understand that particular possibility, I think we'll understand the dynamics of this particular policy. Thank you for listening to me today. Kind of villainization that like for that matter in Maharashtra, the leaders of social justice movement for a very long time were the Mahas, and the Matang claim against the Mahas was based on this particular value, that they are dominating the social cultural institutional space for a very, very long time, and therefore the space required for the Mathans is not more available, and therefore it is the responsibility of the Mahas to do something for the worst of social groups. And therefore in that particular language you will find that those who have shown some mettle, some courage, some mobility for that matter in kind of going into the institution, the burden of social justice mobilization is on them. And I can agree on that burden one has to take. And therefore probably we are missing the last 2 decades multiple other avenues that the Dalit movement has showcased. Like as I said, that the institutional processes through which reservation are implemented are flawed. There are lack of representation. There are not been many people in the major institutions, and therefore I think we need to kind of expand that horizon to the newer spaces. And probably the Bhopal document, the Dalit Bhopal document prepared by the Congress government at that part of time, showcased that particular change. That how, apart from reservation, there are multiple other affirmative action policies and welfare measures required to engage with multiple disadvantaged groups. One simple reservation policy is futile, and therefore probably more than again this kind of a bigger claim, a reprimand of those who have benefited by reservation policy in a very minuscule manner, burdening that to take up the call and again mobilize or do something for the social justice movement. I think there is some kind of an issue, and therefore, more than the ethical and the moralistic language, I think an analytical take on the political process is required. That there is an analytical, and therefore the question of unity, the question of whether the state will be serious in dealing with the worst of social groups or not, that question, and of course the opening of social justice policy framework to the larger domain of private economy, that question has not been taken up. And I think if you open that particular call, I think the issues, as I said, that there are less number of seats. If you open the deliberation in the private economy, there will be ample amount of space where we can accommodate through affirmative action even those who are lagging behind. And therefore, more than a discussion about the bifurcation or limitation, or for that matter, helping the worst of social groups among the elites, among the tribals, I think there is a need to understand that probably social justice needs a bigger space, a bigger articulation, not only within the state institution but outside it, mainly in the private economy. I think that question has not come up in a major way. But thank you very much, sir, for enlightening us, and we learned a lot from this. Thank you.